Hey there, and welcome to another B.Hooked tutorial. I'm your host Brittany, and I'm really excited that you're here in this two-part video series. We're going to learn how to crochet a doll together. Starting with video number 1, we're going to work the legs and the body, and then we're going to follow up in video number 2 with the head, the arms, and putting everything all together. Now before you can get started on your doll, you'll want to first preview the written instructions. We're going to be referring to those here in the tutorial, and you can access that in the video description below, or you can simply type in bhookedcrochet.com/doll into your browser, and you'll find everything you need for this project right there on that page. Now I also want to give a big shout out to my sponsor, Yarnspirations, for allowing me to bring this project to you today. We're going to be using a variety of their products, some of which I'm really excited about because they bring some unique textures to this doll. So a big thanks to them. You can order your supplies, the yarn, directly from their website. You can find convenient links to that on the pattern page as well. We're going to have a look at several different techniques that we're going to use throughout this entire project. We're going to start things off with the magic ring. Don't run for the hills if you hate the magic ring. It's simple with a little bit of practice. I'm going to break it down very slow and easy for you here. So if you are brand new to the magic ring, you can follow along step by step. If you are familiar with the magic ring, however, you can go ahead and fast forward a little bit so you don't have to see that part. Now the first body element we're going to start off with is the legs. We're going to cover that first here in the tutorial, then we're going to move into the body. The first technique we're going to learn is the magic ring, and that's because we're going to use it at the start of the legs, each of the legs, both of the arms, and the head. So you want to get familiar with this technique. The first thing that we'll do is take our working yarn. We want to wrap it around these two fingers coming towards us. So you can see I'm just kind of letting it flow through my fingers in the back, wrapping it around. So I've got two strands, and things look like this. I'm holding on to the working yarn back here. I'm holding on to my tail with my thumb right there. Now you'll take your hook and put it in between your two fingers underneath both of those strands. And the goal is to take this strand and pull it under this one. Now we are using a smaller hook than what we normally would for this type of yarn, so it'll be a little bit more difficult. You might have to help it. Now once you do that, we're going to take our working yarn and yarn over and pull through. Now the final step is to do that one more time. So we're going to create a chain here. We'll yarn over, pull through this loop here. And now we're ready to start on the single crochets for the round. So for each of those body elements, the legs, the arms, and the head, we're going to start a magic ring with 6 single crochet. So I've just pinched it off, so I'm holding on to everything right here, and you can gather your working yarn in your hand, and then you want to make sure you work over the ring and over the tail too. I'll stick my hook into the ring in those underneath those two strands and make a single crochet. We want to do that 6 times. So that was the first. And that's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then what we're going to do is grab that tail and pull it. And when we do, it's going to fasten up. It's basically going to shorten this strand right here and pull everything together. Now you will have to hold on to your work here. So I usually just place my 2 fingers right underneath my hook and allow the working yarn here to go in between those 2 fingers and then pull the tail. And you can see how it fastens up. Now that actually completes the first round. So we are specifically covering the legs here. There are subtle variances between the legs, the arms, and the head, and that's basically the amount of increases that we're going to do. But this magic ring with this number of stitches within it are going to be your starting point for all of those things. So now we're ready to move on to the second round for the legs. And what we want to do is find our first single crochet from our magic ring. We want to make a single crochet into that stitch. So I've caught both of those loops. We'll make a single crochet, and things are going to be tight. It's a little bit more difficult to work because we've got such a small hook here. Bear with it. The result is well worth it. So now take a stitch marker, or you can take a bobby pin if you don't have one of these, and place it in that stitch that you just made. That marks the first stitch of this round, so you know that when you get back to this point, you're finished with round 2 and you don't have to do any more increasing. So because we are increasing, on this second round, we're going to increase every single stitch. We're doing this for the legs, and we're going to do this also for the head. So make 2 single crochets into every single stitch for this round. Since we started with 6 stitches, then we're going to end up with 12 at the end of this round. Now once you've made it to the end of your round, when you've reached that stitch marker there, we can go ahead and remove this. We're not going to use it anymore because for the legs, we no longer need to increase. So we just have 1 round of increase. So go ahead and poke your work out just a little bit like this. It's going to start curving since we're no longer increasing, and just make 1 single crochet into every stitch. You're going to work this around and around. We're not joining at the end of each round, so it's going to continue to work in a spiral, and you just want to keep this up until it measures about 6 inches from this bottom point here. So as we start creating this tube, then we're going to have a bottom point here where we can measure from. So you'll start measuring here when it's 6 inches. Then we're going to have a look at how to fasten off and move on to the next step. All right, now once your leg measures about 6 inches long, we're ready to fasten off. We're going to use the same fastening off technique for the arms as well. So you want to take note here. Because we're working in a spiral, we have a jog here. So that means that this section or this side is lower than where we ended up, and we need to just account for that to make things a little bit smoother. So you'll insert your hook into the next stitch, and we're going to slip stitch. So just grab that working yarn and pull it through the stitch, and then pull it through the loop on your hook. Now that will sort of force that stitch down a little bit so it's a smoother jog, and we're ready to fasten off. Leave yourself a tail that's about 6 inches or so, and then pull that tail through the loop on your hook. Now, of course, you'll want to repeat all of those steps because we need 2 legs. Once you get to that point, we're going to have a look at how to begin crocheting the body next. Now, rather than sewing the legs onto the body, we're actually going to crochet them on so it's more like one piece. We're going to start off with just one of the legs and grab your new yarn. We're going to fasten on, so create your slip knot. And then find the last stitch that you made. It should be a slip stitch. You'll stick your hook into that stitch, add the new yarn, pull it through. I'm going to chain 1 just to secure the join, but that is not going to count as my first stitch. What I really want to do is make a slip stitch in the same space because, again, I really don't want there to be an obvious jog. So I've made that slip stitch, and then I want to add a stitch marker to let me know that that is the first stitch of this new round, because we are going to keep track of that for an increase in the next round. So from here, what I'm going to do is find the next stitch, make a single crochet, and then single crochet in the next stitch 2 more times. So we're making a total of 3 here. Now we can go ahead and grab the other leg, and what I want to do is just single crochet into any stitch. So what I'm going to do is just kind of hide this little jog or that join, and so I'll make my first single crochet in the stitch that's right next to it, but I mean honestly you can pick whichever stitch you want. And then you'll just single crochet as if it were just a normal stitch in your round. And we're going to continue that all the way around the second leg. Now because we have 12 stitches to our leg, we're going to make 11 single crochet here after we make that join. So that first stitch that we did to join the two together, that was the first, and then we're just single crocheting in the remaining 11 stitches. Then it's always a good idea to go ahead and count your stitches to make sure you have a total of 12. It doesn't really impact us for this round, but it will affect the next round, which is where we're going to do some increasing, and we have to have a certain number. Once we have all of the stitches in place on this leg here, we're going to jump back over to the next one. Now just pay attention to where your first single crochet is. We don't want to put an extra stitch there. We'll go ahead and single crochet in the next one, and in each remaining stitch until we get back around to our stitch marker. Alright, now if you've done everything correctly, you should have a total of 24 stitches for this round. Go ahead and double check because like I said, it will make a difference for this next round of increasing. We're ready to move on to row number 2. Now before we move on with the rest of the body, it's a good idea to just go ahead and close up the gap that's here in the middle where we join the two legs together. And I'm just going to take one of my tails, run that through a darning needle, and just add a couple of stitches there so it's nice and secure. And then we can even take the remaining tail and weave it in here along the inside. That's going to make sure that it's a little more secure. Once you have that first round squared away, we're going to move on to the second one. We're going to increase for this round. So go ahead and remove your stitch marker, and we're going to make our first single crochet in that stitch. Now remember, this one was a slip stitch, so it's a little bit easy to get your hook in the wrong place. You want to make sure that you do catch that slip stitch and not the stitch in front of it. That will throw off your stitch count. And we'll single crochet. Now replace your stitch marker in that first stitch, the one we just made, and we're also going to single crochet in the next stitch. So that gets us set up. Now we'll move on to the increase and the repeat here. So the next stitch, we'll make 2 single crochets, followed by 1 single crochet into each of the next 2. Then 2 single crochets in the next, and we'll just continue repeating that until we get back around to our stitch marker. Once you've made it back around to your stitch marker, you should have a total of 32 stitches. So to move on to the repeat for the body, I'm going to remove my stitch marker and place it in the front of any stitch. So I'm just really focusing in on the V, or the front of one of the stitches from that previous row. We're going to use this to help us measure so we get the proper length. Now moving forward, the repeat is just to make 1 single crochet into every stitch. And it's just plain and simple. We're not joining. At the end of the round, we're going to continue to work in a spiral. So just make 1 single crochet into every stitch until you can measure 4 inches from this stitch marker here all the way up. When that reaches 4 inches, we're going to do a little bit of decreasing and shaping, and finally we'll move on to crocheting the head. Once you've worked up the length of your body and you can measure from this stitch marker here about 4 inches, then we're ready to start doing the decreasing, the shaping, so that we can add the head on a little bit later. Well, you'll want to make sure that you stop somewhere around where your stitch marker is. This is going to be the back of the doll. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect, just kind of eyeball it We're going to reset ourselves here because we're going to decrease, so we need to know where our first stitch is. So what I'm going to do is remove the stitch marker, have that ready because I'm going to make my first single crochet of this new round, same as before, in both loops. And then add your stitch marker to that stitch. That way you'll know when you get back around that you've reached the beginning. Now the next thing we want to do is single crochet in the next stitch. Nothing new here. And now we're going to single crochet 2 together. It's a decrease where we're going to lose 1 stitch essentially. So we'll insert our hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. Then insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. Then go ahead and yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So we've turned 2 stitches into 1. We've decreased our stitch count by 1. Now our repeat for this round is really quite simple. We're going to find our next stitch and make a single crochet there. And in the next one after that. So make 2 single crochets total in between each one of our decreases. Now we'll do the decrease one more time. We'll also use this decreasing technique for the head too. All right, now that you've got the hang of the decreasing stitch, that single crochet 2 together, I want to talk about the repeat. We're 5 rounds away from being finished with the body. So what we need to do is finish up this round. We're going to call this the first of that decreasing section, where we place 2 stitches in between our decreases. From there, we're going to do a single crochet round where we just make 1 single crochet into every stitch, followed by another decreasing round. And in that case, we're going to make 1 single crochet in between each of the decreases. From there, we're going to do another single crochet round where we don't increase or decrease or anything, just 1 single crochet into every stitch. And then we're going to follow that up with 1 final round of decreasing, and we'll do a single crochet 2 together in every single stitch. Now once you get to that point, we'll go ahead and come back to the tutorial. We'll talk briefly about fastening off, and then we're going to move right on into the next section. Now once you have completed that decreasing section for your body, it should look something like this, and now's a good time to go ahead and stuff. So now at this point your doll has some legs and a body, but it really needs some arms, a head, facial features, and hair. We're going to look at those details in the next video. You can find that linked here as well as in the video description. And of course, if you haven't done so already, refer to the written instructions for the full supplies list and for full details on how this doll comes together. All you have to do is type in bhookedcrochet.com/doll. You can find all of the information there, as well as where you can purchase your yarn directly from yarnspirations.com.